I feel like in front of a room when I'm looking at the room and I know people in the room. I may not do my usual point outs the way I sometimes do if you've done that before, but maybe virtually. The objective here for sort of the next 50-ish minutes is to focus in more on this topic of the marine robotics space, or a word I use to capture it sometimes is the unmanned maritime systems space, because there's a lot more to it. It's a broad sector. So to set the stage, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip over here and I'm going to offer a quick snapshot of a product, a service product offering that I deliver to clients on a quarterly basis. And the idea here is there's a lot of news, there's a lot of activity, there's email newsletters, there's trade magazines, and something I try to do is I try to collate that. And then for these folks, I give some analysis. So I put out this thing on a quarterly basis. What you're seeing, what you're about to see is what subscribers get, but I've just cut it down. So typically this is a report in the form of a slide deck that's good to about 120 pages. Here, I've tried to focus in on some of the interesting news items relevant mostly to New England. And again, we've talked a lot about being, an epicenter. It's true, there are a lot of companies and a lot of activities here. So I've tried to focus on that as if we were in the virtual Venture Cafe or the Venture Cafe in Providence. But the other thing that we're then going to do is switch in, and we're going to hear from a couple of marine robotics startup companies. And these are companies I have some level of relationship with, but deliberately went to companies outside the region. So really trying to make good use of this virtual opportunity. So these are folks who might not have come to visit us in New England just for this short event, but we get to hear from them. So with that, I'm gonna try to share a screen here. And you're gonna see some PowerPoint slides. And Avi, can you just confirm that popped up?
Confirmed and looking good.
Fantastic. All right. This context slide is here mostly because this is being recorded, and for the record, you can go back and read this and know what's going on. Likewise, acronyms. Wasn't sure how well informed the audience would be. A lot of folks in the audience probably know these, so we're not going to waste time. So diving in, if you were a subscriber of this product, you would see things like this in the report. And this is a big one. It's kind of interesting. So for folks who follow the space, we've referred to companies that have spun out of places. And Hydroid was a company that spun out of Woods Hole back in 2007. They were acquired by Kongsberg Maritime. Kongsberg Maritime is a large player in the space. And as you see here, it was that was an $80 million buy. That was a great exit. That's the term, by the way, if you don't know, exit is when the entrepreneurs sell their company to somebody. Great exit for Hydroid. And a few years in, well, actually many years in, Kongsberg strategically evolved and decided that they would sell this company, Hydroid, to another company, which is Huntington Ingalls. We could spend a lot of time talking about this and what it implies, but what it really highlights is a couple of things. It highlights the growth of the sector, because there's a photo of this new building that Hydroid built not that long ago, right? And that's a nice, sharp-looking building. These have become real, meaningful businesses. They are serving an important customer, in this case, primarily the U.S. Navy. So this a pretty important development in this quarter, and just speaks to the growth of the industry. Different kind of subject. Again, so Teledyne has a footprint. They're a global company, strong footprint here in the New England region on Cape Cod in their vehicles group. And what's interesting here is a partnership with another large company, Trimble, right? So Trimble is very much in the geopositioning business, and this is a survey product aimed at marine construction market. So just ongoing growth of business activities and big companies partnering together. Different spin here. This does touch on a company that I think we can still call a startup. So Thermahan is technically a startup company founded by a retired US Navy admiral, looking at the idea of providing services to the military using marine robotics. And what's happening here is they have a partnership with a multinational company, Igloo, who have a certain kind of robot boat. And so the startup company is broadening its relationships as it grows and expands its activities with the Navy. Interesting to see what are the drivers here. So Igloo has been very commercial with this product, whereas Thermahan has been very defense focused. So we'll have to keep an eye on all that. Was a busy quarter. DARPA has been pushing out a variety of interesting challenges. This was just one. As an aside, by the way, the subscribers of this, you would normally be able to click on the link and take you to the news item. But you can go Google the various DARPA programs. What's interesting is the current DARPA programs that are coming out seem very focused on increasing the role of robotics and automation and autonomy. So in this case, they're envisioning a sea train of cargo vessels crossing the ocean to deliver cargo without crews. This is a really important reminder. We've spent a lot of time talking about robots. Earlier, there was conversation about skills and interests and how do people make careers. This program is all about making it so that a robot vessel can communicate to an occupied vessel using voice. So if you are in the business of going to sea, you're familiar with being on the bridge of your ship and you're sailing along and you see another ship coming and you would hail them. You would get on the radio and say, you know, vessel such and such, this is vessel such and such. What are you doing next, right? If you're trying to resolve uncertainty, you'll use the radio. So this is a Navy program that's going to work on that. And I think what's interesting here is, well, could we just stick Alexa or Siri in there? And you know, would that work, right? So here's an opportunity where a huge other industry, voice recognition and automation, and that whole industry of digital assistants might actually just come in and solve this problem for the Navy, or it may not, but it talks to those overlaps we might envision. This is another development. So L3 Harris is so this Ocean Server was the company that built robot boats. They were, robot submarines, autonomous underwater vehicles. They were based in Fall River. They sold the L3 not long ago. So L3 was in and of itself a large defense contractor. Not long ago, Harris, another large defense contractor, got together with L3. So it's now L3 Harris. But the people building the robots are still the friends we all knew down in the Fall River area. So what's interesting here is that the government is using what they call an other transaction agreement or other transactional authority, which is a new approach to contracting. And so the government went off and very rapidly bought some new prototype vehicles for mine hunting. And the press release here was that L3 Harris delivered their prototype under that contract. We'll see how those results go. There's a lot of procurement activity in the Navy these days, and these are shaping the impressions of the tech. I deliberately threw this one in here. Obviously, China is nowhere near New England, but it's one of the things that I think it's important to highlight is the drivers and the externalities in the space. And you know, China has rapidly grown its capabilities in ocean technologies, whether that's undersea vehicles or robot boats. And here in the US, we've only recently started talking about robot boats carrying weapons. And here China is proclaiming a mini destroyer. So obviously we'd all like to live in a world of peace, but military tension in the naval environment is a big deal. And it's important to keep an eye on the rest of the globe. This is very much a home region news. So even though this is the Rhode Island Venture Cafe, not far away at UMass Dartmouth, recently received a very large award, really intended to catalyze undersea technology. And then perhaps this will lead to some of these new startups, as we were alluding to earlier. So we'll have to stay tuned. It's a fairly new program, just getting started, but it was a substantial award, and hopefully we'll all benefit. This one's another mention. So another local company we heard mentioned earlier was Bluefin Robotics. Like Hydroid, now Bluefin Robotics is on another owner. So Bluefin was originally sold to Battelle a large government contractor who sold it to General Dynamics, another large government contractor. But they're still based here in Massachusetts, and they're building their undersea robots. And in this case, they sold them to Australia. Again, it's a defense mission, but global market that we're servicing here from New England. This one is interesting for a variety of reasons. So in this case, it's an announcement that Lockheed was one of the winners of this program called Manta Ray. So DARPA has been doing a lot of interesting undersea stuff. But I wanted to leave this in here to remind the audience that Lockheed also has an undersea footprint here in the area in Marion, Massachusetts. So they acquired a business that was called Sipican many, many years ago. But so there is this, this industry footprint here again in the region. Hydroid, mentioning again, this one I'm bringing up in particular because it speaks to the dynamic of an ocean robot is only as useful as the sensors it can carry. And so this is a case where this particular sensor, we're not going to geek out about it, but it's a power sensor. It's very complex. And Hydroid is making it better is the short answer, right? Couldn't go through this without some news from Woods Hole. They do typically do put out lots of interesting news. And here, as you would expect, it's a science result. And this can be subtle, but what happened here is it's not a big deal that an ocean robot collected a sample. That's relatively routine. Here, the impact is that the robot went in, found the site, found the sample, collected the sample, and did it all without being operated directly by people. So this is a case of the robotic system becoming more intelligent, more complex, more autonomous, a word that we often overuse. This is another interesting outcome, again, local region. So if folks are not familiar with Draper, they used to be known as Draper Labs. Now they like to be called Draper. Draper traces its roots back to MIT research that left campus to support the Cold War. Draper, for those of us who are familiar, is very influential in undersea technology. In this case, they applied some of their expertise to a very hot topic, which is microplastics in the ocean. Tech is cool, mission is important, but a question I'd ask anybody is, who exactly is going to pay to employ this technology, right? Is this going to be just a government-driven thing? Is it philanthropy? Is it going to become a market? Hard to say, but it's interesting to see the intersection of traditionally a very defense-focused player with a very philanthropic or ocean conservation cause at the moment. I left this one in here. Technically, Kraken is a company from our neighbors just to the north, headquartered in Newfoundland with a large Nova Scotia. They do have a U.S. subsidiary and their U.S. team. Many of them are here in the New England area. The other thing that brings us up, we talked a lot about funding, right? And this is just a case, in this case, Canada has a specific program that helps smaller growing companies like this get their products to market. There are similar ways one can advance your questions in the U.S. Teledyne shows up again. If for the folks who are longtime followers of the ocean robot field, this is a pretty big deal because it took Teledyne's undersea vehicle portfolio in a whole new direction. They had previously had a smaller vehicle, couldn't go as deep, didn't do as much in a sense, and this is a very large vehicle, and there's only a few manufacturers in the world delivering this kind of capability. And so here Teledyne is having some success in delivering their product. Hydroid delivers another product. This one is that same program I mentioned earlier. What's sort of interesting here, right, is so the US Navy is buying product and actually making its procurement decisions by buying a few vehicles and experimenting with them. And that's part of that rapid acceleration of procurement strategy. Getting close to the end so we can change up and hear from some startups. I bring this one up not because IBM or the company they're working with here is in the US, but two really interesting trends. So this company out of the UK Plymouth. They're basically going to take a robot UK, recreate the route taken by the Mayflower, which came to the Plymouth, Mass. And I live one town over from Plymouth, Mass, and some of our companies are headquartered in Plymouth, Mass. So there's going to be a robot boat going from Plymouth to celebrate the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower crossing. Okay, that's cool. But the other thing that's very interesting is they have a strategic partnership with IBM. We alluded earlier in the conversation, if you were with us, to sort of big companies. Why is IBM bringing the artificial intelligence captain into this mission? Because it's a great opportunity for IBM to deploy an immense computational history and resource to a growing industry, which is going to be robotic ships. So hopefully we'll see this project go forward. No real word on whether COVID is causing any issues with this project or not. Again, and mentioning now, Green Sea Systems is a company that's been growing nicely in recent years. They've been headquartered in Vermont. And recognizing, I guess, that there's only so many ocean technologists living in the mountains of Vermont, they're opening a satellite facility here in New England. So again, that dynamic of cluster that we talked about earlier, we see coming to be. I'm leaving this one in here, again, not a New England issue, but it speaks to rapid growth in business dynamics. So there's a company known as Ocean Infinity that over the past 3 to 5 years really shook up the approach to ocean survey, basically by writing a massive check. They chartered a bunch of ships, they bought a tremendous number of AUVs, put them on the ships, and they just sort of said, you know what, we're going to do everything faster, we're going to write big checks, and we're going to go do a whole bunch of stuff. And we could spend lots of time talking about that, but basically they had some success. And now what they're saying is, well, now we're going to write more big checks and we're going to build a fleet of robot boats to bring into this industry. So this is not, this is a computer rendering. The boats are not in the water now, although they're supposed to be coming online rapidly. And this will just be an interesting thing to watch. We had conversation about wind farms, for example. Will this kind of technology become a contributor to wind farm servicing? We'll have to stay tuned. Other things going on, I mentioned this again, but when I go through this, I always like to point to big picture trends, right? So sometimes it's not a specific news item. I've mentioned it again. You heard me mention it earlier. Defense is a big deal right now, alongside energy, right? And so just keep watching what's going on in US Navy circles. And I mentioned this earlier as well. This was pretty interesting, right? Offshore solar. This was news to me. I mean, I've often heard it talked about, but this was the first time I was aware that there's a platform out there actually collecting solar energy. So could be yet another area of growth, particularly as we sit there and think about what's the future of renewables. So I'm nearly done here. Hopefully we'll be able to take some questions. And so I just throw this in. I always like to capture a little bit of what's new and interesting in general. Sometimes it's a neat shipwreck was found or something. But here I thought it was interesting. If you haven't seen coverage of this, there's these robots running around hospitals in China using UV light to disinfect, right? Okay, that's cool. What's a little deeper level of interest is, as I understand it, the UV light that they are using is actually hazardous to humans. So it's not just that you're doing a job faster or you're making it easier to get the job done. You're doing the job in a way that people couldn't do, right? And by the way, you're trusting these robots to run around with this hazardous to human light on them. So lots of things happening there very, very quickly. So I offer that one just as in the Black Swan theme, right? There's a robot thing going on. So there's a report there. You don't need to read it here. This is stuff folks can catch up on after the fact. And I'll sort of pause here. And in fact, I'm gonna stop sharing and transition into some brief Q&A.
You mentioned the solar. docks out there. And as we all know, Anthony has been, and Power Docks has been around for a while in this area. What was that company?
Yeah, well, so just to be clear, Anthony Power Docks is one of our local entrepreneurs, and he's focused on harvesting solar energy, I would say, in a more focused application, right, for vessels or to recharge robots. My understanding is that this new thing is literally a solar energy farm. So sticking a massive raft of solar panels out on the ocean and driving the electricity back to the grid, right? So that, and as an aside, one of the challenges has to do with keeping that thing survivable, and and making sure it survives and it performs and all that. So folks have looked hard at it, and this was news to me that they're actually building one.
Very cool.
Thanks. Well, I'll suggest, if it's all right with them, if Judd Kauffman from Terradepth wants to take over and do our first flash talk. What we asked these entrepreneurs to do wasn't so much pitch their business as if you're investors, or just tell you about their business, but it's also give some insight about how they got started. In the idea that if we're trying to attract people into the field. So a little bit of the origin story, as well as just a summary of the business. So Judd, all you, man.
Hey, thanks, Justin. Hey, everyone. Thanks for inviting me into your cool group. I'm coming at you from Austin, Texas, which surprisingly now has more than a handful of ocean-going ventures, Terradepth being one of them. I don't have any presentation prepared, mostly because I'm lazy, but partially because I also think that Q&A tends to be just better anyway. So I'll do, as Justin requested, I'll do a quick kind of intro on who I am, and then how Terradepth came to be. And then would love it if those of you who have any questions about either what we're doing at Terradepth or how we got into the industry or whatever. Happy to answer those questions. So without further ado, background on me. So grew up small town here in Texas. 9/11 happened. I was in college, dropped out, joined the Navy. Spent about 10 years there, a couple of years as a rescue swimmer and an intel analyst, and then became a Navy SEAL. Got out and went back to school at Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee. Was looking to get into the music industry. Did not go that direction. Ended up starting a consulting firm, mostly focused on human capital stuff. Ran that with a friend of mine from the Navy for about 6 years. And we worked for some pretty cool companies. So Scott's Miracle-Gro, Seagate Technology, Glassdoor, Pinterest, a few others, Johnson & Johnson. That was a services-based business and was tough to run, but learned a lot in the process about entrepreneurship and about business. Sold that company in 2018 after my buddy and I had the idea for Terradepth, which I'll get into that in a minute. Raised the funds, started Terradepth in 2018, and here we are. I have an MBA from University of Texas. I have 3 little kids, all under 5, and they will probably make an appearance soon, most likely audibly. So stand by for that. On Terradepth. So in my Navy days, the submarine, the San Francisco, crashed into the seamount, which is a story most of you have probably heard of. Those of us in my unit at the time, we were in Iraq, got the briefing, and it was like, well, how did this happen? And the short answer from the intel analyst is, well, we didn't know that seamount was there, just snuck up on us. So it's like, all right, well, how does that happen? This is the U.S. Navy. This is our most prized assets, a nuclear-powered submarine, and we just ran into a mountain. That's crazy. So even though I'd been in the Navy for a few years at that point, I was shocked to learn that day, and then subsequently more research, just how ignorant we were, not just the U.S. Navy, but the entire planet, all of humanity. We don't know much about the ocean, despite decades and decades of great efforts from a lot of very brilliant minds. So that planted the seed that somebody should be doing something smarter and better in the ocean, and we need to solve this problem. But I never thought there was a business opportunity there. I never had an interest in getting into the ocean industry, never even imagined it. But during my post-Navy consulting years, spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley, learning about technology, working with and for technology companies, and just started seeing some very impressive stuff happening with autonomous systems and robotics and virtual reality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And one day, just sort of thought, man, why isn't, or is anybody applying this to the undersea space? Took a high level look at it really for the first time in my life. Saw a few companies, you know, Ocean Infinity at that point was doing their big PR push. Sail Drone was kind of getting off the ground with a lot of hype and PR. So I became interested in it, shared it with my buddy, Joe Wolfel, who's my co-founder. Neither one of us are engineers. Neither one of us have much more ocean experience than you know, ground troops in the Navy get. So we contacted some friends we knew through the Navy who worked on the miniature submarines that do SEAL delivery. And a lot of that work was done at MIT, got connected with folks like Justin Manley, a few other kind of who's who in the industry, and just asked the question broadly, hey, is it possible to, and does it make sense to take technology that's been developed for, let's say, the terrestrial world or outer space exploration, and kind of try to automate and scale deep ocean exploration so we can finish understanding what's beneath the ocean floor. And, you know, all these super smart people that know the industry said, yeah, we're kind of waiting for someone to figure this out. And we had a very simple idea. Again, my co-founder and I, neither one of us are particularly intelligent. So we spend our effort just trying not to be stupid. And we kind of took that concept, which Justin, I think, has shared in the past with his newsletter, but I'll go over it really briefly. The idea is you have one autonomous robot that dives to full ocean depth. It's got a twin that maintains geolocation while at the surface. So it's capable of operating at the surface and at depth. When the submerged vessel runs low on juice and needs a battery recharge, it comes to the surface, its buddy goes down, and they sort of leapfrog through the ocean until they both need to come home to be serviced. And that's, we think, at least 30 days, maybe 60 days with no human intervention. And because the robot is very intelligent, it will know when it sees things like a shipwreck or a thermal vent, and it will know if it needs to turn on a camera or a video camera or do a second pass or surface and contact HQ here in Austin and say, hey, I don't know what this is. What should we do with it? So we raised some money from Seagate Technology, which does data solutions. This is a big data problem, obviously. And we are past the seed round and should have our system in the water in the Gulf of Mexico this November, unless we screw things up. I'll stop there. That's us in a nutshell.
Judd, thanks. That's really a great story. And just one quick comment before people, if anyone has questions they want to throw in, and reminder, maybe easier if you throw the questions in the chat box. But I mentioned earlier in the day, or in this conversation, that I've found it really compelling when folks from outside the space come in. And one of the things I think is really interesting. So I have had the good fortune to work with Judd and Joe and their team and watch them grow. And not only is it interesting to watch founders who are not of the ocean tech space engage it, but I will also say it's really interesting to watch folks with the background and the discipline and the focus that Joe and Judd have as former service members. They really bring an approach to getting things done that I think is actually quite beneficial to startup companies. So a little bit of an aside there, but I do think certain types of personalities are good at the risk and good at the challenge and good at the discipline. So do folks have any questions for Judd about Terradepth or himself?
I just saw one. What's your view on technology transfer from Christine?
Yeah, well, Judd, I mean, what are your thoughts on what you see going on there, right? Because you're talking about Seagate. Maybe you should elaborate a little bit about sort of the Seagate issue there, or idea.
Sure. So we spent the first 9 months, once we had this idea, and we thought, yeah, maybe this could work, but we didn't know the industry. We didn't really fully understand robotics or autonomous systems or AI, but we knew that, for example, an autonomous drone made a whole lot more sense than a manned craft, especially in a dangerous environment. We also understood very intimately how dangerous the ocean can be. So you've got, automatically risk and cost reduction by removing the human from the loop. And I'll get to the technology transfer question in a little bit of a roundabout way. But what we saw was that, these surveys sometimes are $200,000, $400,000, $600,000 a day, and for good reason, right? You've got a really amazing ship with a very highly trained crew, and that costs a lot of money to maintain. So the first question was, all right, well, this is what's driving the cost of ocean exploration, and this is what is also limiting ocean exploration. That's why we can't scale it, because no one's going to foot the bill at $500,000 a day just to go prospect in the abyssal plain. So we get it. So the first solution to find was, okay, can you remove the human from the loop? Or do you have to have a ship filled with trained people? And that's the only way to do it. And what we found is that a lot of folks believed that you could remove the requirement for the surface ship mostly, and that an autonomous system, if it was smart enough and designed well, could replicate most of the work of a surface ship, plus its AUVs. So it hadn't been done before. So everything we're doing, aside from the hardware, the submarine we're building on the hardware side is not particularly innovative, though some of our engineers might take issue with that statement. We're innovating on the software side. We're innovating around the brain of the submersible. No one has made a fully autonomous deep ocean submarine. Boeing has their Echo Voyager. That's different. It's not scalable. It's $120 million a piece. We're building these for, we think, under $2 million a piece. There's a lot of value to using analogies to solving problems. And as entrepreneurs coming into a space that we're not familiar with, we knew there was risk inherent in that, right? Because we're not experts, but we knew also there's an advantage there because we're looking at things with fresh eyes, and we have a white canvas. And so we said, all right, well, what are the best technologies out there? I don't care if they've ever been marinized before. What are the best technologies for autonomous systems, et cetera, et cetera. And we went to Tesla. We hijacked a guy that ran their autonomous lab. We went to another company here in Austin that's a software company, hired one of their engineers or architects who has never even been on a boat. And he's our chief architect now. So there's a lot of value in pulling from other industries and other technologies and thinking about this problem in a very subjective way, because that's where innovation comes from. And that's how you get disruption. And I think, disrupting this industry is critical to make everyone's job easier, because, you talk to academics and researchers and they say, yeah, we can't afford the data and we can't get it for free. It's just too difficult. It's not that, let's say, an old company who has it doesn't want to give it up. They just don't know how to find it. It's too much of a pain in the ass to just find the data and give it to the person that needs it. So we're creating a Google Earth type software system that users can log on to. It's very intuitive. It's very beautifully designed. And you can go to the bottom of the ocean floor and you can fly through the terrain within this three-dimensional virtualized point cloud that we have created from sonar data.
Yeah, so what was great is you're paying attention, folks, right? So the story of the different inputs of tech and the talent, right? And got a lot of new minds coming in. So there were a bunch of other great questions. I think we should let those roll for now, just in the interest of time, because we do have another interesting startup. So I would ask Derek if he can come in over
5:30
here.
is fine. Do that. Okay.
And so Derek, you have the con if you want to pop on, and others out there, if you're not speaking, want to be on mute, would be good. So Derek is going to tell us another startup story.
All right, so does everyone see my my screen there?
Yep, gotcha.
Okay, great. Let me just get my my cheat sheet out over here as well. Hi, so I'm Derek from Igloo Innovations. We been working on this project for a couple of years now, and this is just I guess basically an overall project update to show you where we came from with it and where it's going. First of all, for those of you who don't know us, we're a Vancouver, BC based engineering service provider. We merge technical and creative aspects of product development in our primary industries of marine and theme park rides. So we've worked on a wide array of vehicle and also stationary product designs, from submarines to roller coasters is what we say usually. So throughout our careers, we've led several exciting projects for major end clients like the US Navy, ExxonMobil, Caterpillar, Dell, Disney, Universal Studios, and that's just naming a few of them. Our work has really gone pretty far with our both before and since starting Igloo. So some of our specialties are concept ideation, system design, heavy mechanical design, structural design and analysis, and then creating prototypes and first articles. We partner with trusted partners for controls and software, as well as more product level manufacturing. And we stand out, as I alluded to before, because we have an art to part approach for a lot of our projects, particularly in the rides and attraction space. Creative's very important there, and you really need engineering and creative to be merged there. We also have worked on vehicles on land, sea, and now in the air. And we're a self-funded idea incubator. So we generally hold brainstorming sessions with our entire team to talk about what cool things they'd like to create, to be quite honest. And this is intended to reach our original goal set back when we started in 2010, of introducing our own products to market. And we were somewhat agnostic with where we actually, what markets we actually wanted to go after when we did that. You know, we had our background in marine engineering and rides, but it didn't necessarily have to be there. So this culminated in a bunch of different ideas. I admittedly wanted to build a small ocean-going robot myself. And my partner, Jason, who's our very creative visionary, said, well, you know, how's that solving any problems, you know? And deployment is always an issue for any vehicle of any size. What if we enabled them to fly to a location for deployment? So that's when we came up with Project Seahawk. So from the beginning, what we, you know, in our limited self-funded budget, we were working with a lot of off-the-shelf drone components, as well as off-the-shelf DIY ROVs. You can see the blue ROV down there on the bottom left, to enable us to come together with an actual, with our first floating mock-up. So we started back in 2016. By 2017, we had a floating mock-up that had dual propulsion systems on it, so it could land on the water and move itself around. Think about an ASV that could fly, type of thing. And then by 2018, we had a fully functioning submersible drone vehicle, which we call the Alpha prototype. That is an actual picture of it there, rendered very nicely, just so you know, but that's our vehicle there. From here, I'm just going to switch over and show you guys a video of this vehicle working. You see a bird?
Yep.
Okay. So here's our video of a dock chain inspection we did with the vehicle locally here in BC. And it's very much a prototype, but you can see where our progress was up to about a year ago now. Okay, so as you can see, we took a bit of a, you know, if you build it, they will come approach with it, because something like this was quite difficult to conceptualize to many. And since this time when we made this video, we've been working on, you know, really finding target markets for it and designing, you know, listening to the voice of potential customers and designing concepts that would work in the real world. One of them, based very much, based 100% off of what you just saw, is our submerging configuration of vehicle, which, you know, we call this the original fly, swim, fly vehicle. And it enables you to dive wirelessly dive wirelessly via deployable antenna buoy. And it has dual propulsion systems, so that it behaves very much like an ROV when it's underwater. And then we also have a floating configuration. This is more of a workhorse. By removing a lot of the components you need to enable it to submerge wirelessly under operator control, you save quite a bit of weight. So this vehicle has a much higher payload capacity, and it's designed more to land on the water and then deploy and recover payloads. It's got an umbilical winch on it, and you know, at the end of that tether, we can have sensors, samplers, vehicles, you name it. So during this more market research phase we've been in, we've come up with a number of applications with inspection and surveillance, data collection, sampling, data harvesting, relaying data from submerged assets, a whole bunch. And these applications tend to show up in quite a few different industries. Our early adopters are in environmental management, but we're also seeing a lot of interest from defense and security and energy. Some discussions around aquaculture, and then also a lot around coastal facility, more from a security and inspection standpoint. So after, you know, collecting all this market information or all these different applications, we've come to our minimum viable product, which is probably quite new for most of the audience here that has seen this before. So our minimum viable product, we call it the F4. It's a floating quadcopter. That's what the F4 stands for. And it's more for aquatic sciences, environmental, bio, intended for inspection, or also intended for inspection type work. More for nearshore and inland ops, and also some trial work in harsher environments. Admittedly, this is a smaller vehicle. It's what we can afford to build off bootstrapping right now. And it's also intended to further validate the market, so that we can head into more specialized applications. It's got a very modular design, so it's kind of a jack of many trades. And we can upgrade the propulsion systems on it quite easily. Those booms are removable. It's got swappable payload skids on it, like an ROV would have. And also the umbilical winch is modular. So that allows us to have two main variants, the F4 and the F4C. The C stands for coaxial. As you can see, we double up on the air propulsion there. And that vehicle is designed around being able to carry a small ROV. You see an example using the Seadrone Inspector 3 on there. It's a very nice package for something like this. It's quite light for what it is, and it's small and easy to use. So in our next step on the tech side, we're building a floating mock-up in parallel with our detail design phase, which is currently underway, although going a little bit slower than I'd like it to go right now. But we take a modified off-the-shelf Hex H2O vehicle. It's more of I would say a camera-carrying prosumer type of vehicle. It's not really intended for commercial or any type of industrial application, and it's definitely for calmer waters. But we're using this to test out our controls. It won't be able to have a winch, but we've been able to integrate an echo sounder. We have a wet gimbal that we can put on it, and there's some hydrologic sensors we're looking at integrating now. The original plan was for it to be demo ready this month, and it's sitting on a shelf in another shop right now with nobody able to work on it. So we're thinking probably summer 2020. Next steps on the business side, we're launching a spinoff. Igloo is a service company and will always be a service company, and we'll also always spin off ideas like this. But we hope to have Seahawk Robotics, Inc. Launched by early May. From there, we're looking at demos and pilot projects to find funding to continue the work on it. And with that, we want to increase our range and capability, build larger, more purpose-built vehicles, or even smaller purpose-built vehicles, and then integrate with other UXV ecosystems to join the system of systems. There's a lot of work going on in multi-domain systems right now that we think we can help with. So I just want to touch on the COVID crisis a little bit. So for us, we've actually, we haven't had to respond much to the crisis. It's hurt our services side of the business for sure, with rides and attractions. There are people going to parks, there's parks, there's vehicles that have, or sorry, not vehicles, but rides that have been delayed to open until 2021 now because there's no point in opening at this point. But we've operated mainly remotely out of home offices since 2018, when the Seahawk admittedly forced us to convert our offices into shop space to build it. And I'm sure this is a common story with many startups. Do you want a desk or do you want a place to work and solder and stuff? So that kind of happened to us a couple of years ago. So we're well equipped for this remote new normal of remote work, I guess. But some positives is that we're seeing quite a bit more attention lately. I think without as much day-to-day, a lot of our network is getting in touch with us or responding to us faster to talk about cool new ideas and applications. So it's resulted in an increase of RFPs for us to join larger funding proposals. We have a couple on our desks right now that we're trying to get through. And then, you know, maybe a bit of a joke about the situation we're in now is it's definitely making networking and speaking opportunities less costly. I didn't have to fly to your part of the world to come see you guys and talk to you. So for a startup, it's somewhat advantageous. So that's pretty much all I have to say on this.